This clip is brought to you by VegasWinners.com. Get expert sports betting advice from some of the best handicappers in the world. Head on over to VegasWinners.com and win yourself some money.
It's kind of hard to believe how much is happening so quickly, too. You know, I mean, Rick Rude just came in.
Mm-hmm.
They're setting up Starrcade.
Yep.
We've broken Tully's leg, put hard times on him. And Magnum's about to crash 2 days after this was filmed. Wrestling's going to change. Next week on the show, we're getting a lot of fun stuff to unpack here on the program, including maybe one of the best. I just said that Big Mama thing was top 10. Well, this is too. You're going to have the NWA television champion Dusty Rhodes be followed in Charlotte in his car to the offices of Jim Crockett Promotions, and the Horsemen attack him outside.
Right.
Then we get an update on how Magnum TA is doing, and we start to build towards the unbelievable Road Warriors match at Starrcade. There's so much going on here, Tony. I really, you know, you and I've said it a bunch on the air and off the air, how much fun we would have had if Dusty Rhodes was around to sort of tell the tale.
Oh my.
Can you imagine if he was available to us now? And of course, given everything that's happened in wrestling, it's unlikely he would still be working for WWE. It's very likely he would be working for AEW.
No question.
He'd be happy to jump on this program and talk a little bit about what was going to happen and what the plans were and what he was thinking as Booker. But
yeah,
goodness gracious, man, this is some great stuff through a lot of adversity.
And that's one of the real keys here. 86 Starrcade was the biggest event for Jim Crockett Promotions every year. Called it the granddaddy of them all. We mentioned it there, and we had to promote it and move ahead in the face of tragedy. So it was a very unique time for us to do that. And I wish Dusty was around too, and for many reasons. We had such a great relationship. We had such a great. I think my relationship with Dusty was kind of like my relationship with you, in that we gave each other shit all the time.
Right.
And he always said, "You're the only person that can call me a motherfucker and get away with it." And I used to motherfuck him all the time. And I used to remember thinking, I would think back into my fandom of how big of a Dusty Rhodes fan I was growing up or in college and high school, and thinking about that and thinking, here I am with him now, motherfucking him. Life is wonderful. Yeah, I wish he was around for many reasons. What a great characters I came across in my life, Conrad. Great characters.
Let's talk about Dusty for a minute. He found himself in the main event of a dark match that was happening literally the day after, or the day of rather, Magnum's crash, October 14th. He had the night off. That's always been fascinating to me in the story of Magnum. We discussed it with Jim Crockett in our Conversations with Conrad episode. Magnum asked for the day off, and he went out on the town and was in a bar in Charlotte somewhere, instead of being at a TV taping in Columbia, South Carolina. And of course, you know, everything changes with one decision. Had he been on that show, he would have gone on last. It was Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA taking on Ric Flair and Jimmy Garvin, or that's what was advertised.
Okay.
So they have of course, substitution for Magnum. At that point, Magnum had not wrecked. It was the same day. Fast forward though, and Jim Crockett is going to load the wagons on the 18th and go north to Philadelphia. And what we're going to see, well, what was advertised, we should say, was Nikita Koloff and Ivan Koloff teaming with Crusher Khrushchev to take on Wahoo McDaniel, Ron Garvin, and Dick Murdoch. So the Russians versus Wahoo, Ron, and Dick.
Okay.
Here's what we got instead. This is October 18th, Jim Crockett Promotions, Philadelphia, the Civic Center, 7,000 fans on hand. The main event was Dusty Rhodes with the NWA US champion Nikita Koloff by his side. pinning J.J. Dillon, who was substituting for Tully Blanchard, along with Ole Anderson and Tully Blanchard at ringside. It only takes 57 seconds after a series of punches, and then Nikita is going to hoist Dillon in the air. Rhodes hits an elbow to the head from the top rope. Nikita fights with Ole in the ring for much of the duration of the contest. And after the bout, Arn and Tully are going to help JJ from the ring as Ric Flair comes out, yells at Koloff. Moments later, Rhodes grabs the mic. This is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania now.
Mm-hmm.
It says into the microphone, "Tell Hulk Hogan Dusty's in town."
Wow.
Of course, the WWF was running a show across town at the Spectrum. And this is Koloff's first appearance with Rhodes. So as everybody remembers, it was Dusty and Magnum running roughshod here in 1986 as a pair.
Right.
And the Russians were their enemy. And of course the Horsemen.
Right.
But all of a sudden now, in a pretty interesting booking decision, Dusty says, and again, this is the 18th, 4 days after the accident. What do we do now? Where do we go from here? What if Dusty made a different decision? What would that have looked like? But instead, what he chose was something I don't think anybody would have predicted.
Right.
Nikita Koloff becomes a babyface. What did you think of that in hindsight?
I thought at the when it was done, I thought it was one of the great moves.
Yep.
The Charlotte Coliseum in the cage, and I'm sure we're going to show the footage here. When Nikita walked in the cage and helped Dusty when they were beating up on Dusty, was one of the biggest pops I had ever heard in wrestling. And I remember distinctly, and I'll mention this again when we see it, distinctly standing there with Jimmy Crockett. We walk in the back and Jimmy says, "Not many times does something make my eyes tear up in wrestling, but that made me tear up because of the emotion and that we were feeling with Magnum and just because of the pop that the fans had that day." At the time, I thought it was a tremendous move. I don't think Nikita was as big a draw as a babyface. He was a heel in retrospect. But it was the move he made. And when we went to Starrcade, Dusty wanted to just shine a light on Nikita and get brighter and brighter and brighter. He said, "Many people may think that Magnum's coming back. And when we unveil this light, it's Nikita standing there and he's taking Magnum's place." I don't know if we portrayed that well in Starrcade or not, but that's what Dusty wanted. And it was a great move at the time. Again, I said earlier that the best time to turn a heel babyface is when he's red hot, and Nikita was a pretty hot heel, winning the best of 7.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe this is real, but we not only got a handicapper, but we got the best ever. How are you so good at handicapping these games? I mean, 4-0, that's quite a streak already.
Well, let's talk about every pick I've given this year in the NFL as an example. 23-8. Every pick I've given this year. 4 weeks in the bag, 23-8. There's nobody in the country that can match what I do, but I always make sure, because anybody, Conrad, could make up anything. They could tell you and blow smoke and tell you, "Oh, I'm the greatest." But I am independently monitored and documented, so nobody could ever question what I say and go, "I don't believe it." I send every pick to an independent monitoring and documentation service that has to get the pick before the game goes off and then publishes it after the game goes off so anybody can see what I gave. But this is the best start I've ever had. I've never been this good to start a season. You don't win every week, 4 weeks in a row, everything you put out. It's been the kind of year I've had. So get on a hot streak, because when a guy's on a hot streak like me, you want to ride it. I've always had a talent for picking winners. Never quite as hot as I am right now, but I've always been very good at it. And I think it's because I do more homework than anybody else. The average guy or gal watching this podcast, they don't have time. They have a career. They have jobs. They might read the newspaper or go online and see something, but they don't have time 80 hours a week to study the games. That's what I do. And I have a crew of guys behind me, my consultants, who every week we get together 3 times a week, and they throw their ideas at me. I throw my ideas at them. And then I pick the final 5 plays on Saturday and Sunday in college and pro football. So, I mean, I've got a great team behind me too, but we're all doing together hundreds of hours of homework. So you don't have to. It's all at vegaswinners.com.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to vegaswinners.com right now. Let's win some money.
All the talk about USA, down with USA, the Kremlin wants this, the Kremlin wants that, the Russian sickle. Nikita was, in many ways, kind of like our MJF. He lived his gimmick. MJF does, not to the extreme that Nikita did. Once a heel, always a heel, but in that regard. But it ended up being okay, and of course it was at the end of '86, and then '87, as we know.
We still got to decide if we're going to go back in time to 85 or if we're going to do 87 next. But
yeah, well, I think the Peacock doesn't pick up at the beginning of '85. I went back and looked at season 1. It starts later because we started in April of '85. So we can pick up '85. I love '85 for many reasons, but I'm just not so sure that we'll get the whole season.
maybe we'll keep going with 87 and we'll put 85 on WHW Patreon. What do you think about that?
That sounds like a pretty good idea. I love this year. I'm not so sure I love 87 as much.
No, nobody loves 87 as much. It starts to hit the skids a little bit in 87, but I think that's important to document. There's a lot of great stuff that happened there. Right. Even when people talk about how terrible 89 was, man, you start with the trilogy of Flair and Steamboat. Mm-hmm. And the Steiners start to become a thing, and Sting continues to grow, and you get Muda in there, and and we finished the year with Flair and Funk, so it's not all bad in 89.
For me, it was wonderful because I was in the WWE.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.